Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Bugsmashers.
Whoa. Slashers?
Yeah, slashers. When I run the show, it's Bugsmashers, Mark.
Hold on. I don't think so.
Bugsmashers!
Welcome to Bugsmashers. Spence, what kind of bug did you fix for me today?
So today we're going to be looking at a shopping bug. Part of what I've been working on in the last month is adding the new interaction system to our shopping experience, so you can look at the shopping racks and buy your clothing, buy your ship items, and get the new highlighting and interactions. However, intentionally, not all of these interactions work to begin with. Ship items worked, but clothing and armor are an entirely different beast, and so today we talk about the physics of why that isn't working.
Well, sounds like a fun little thing. Let's take a look.
Hello people of the internet. We've got a shopping bug today that I'd like to walk you through. So let me start by showing it off. If you've been watching any of our recent ATVs and you've seen me on here talking about shopping, we've gotten a new shopping interaction system here. So same old interaction system we've had for some of the things we've been introducing, like carryable crates and stuff, we're now putting in shops. So you can walk up to these weapons on the display rack and you can inspect them and you can buy them. So bring up Mobiglass and they're 5 UHC. It sounds like a realistic price for this gun. Definitely not a test number or anything. Cool, so you could buy these. It's a feature I've been working on recently, but there has been a bug that we have just squashed recently and I'd like to show you it. So if we leave the shop and we're gonna go head over to Kasaba. Don't mind the guy on the floor there, he's doing just fine. Let's see. Okay, so we're here in Kasaba and it should be immediately obvious that we're not getting the interaction highlighting on any of these. We can't even bring up the different buy or try on prompts. So this may be one of the rare, or depending on who you ask, not so rare occasions of an intentional bug. And I checked this code in knowing that the shirts and any of these clothing items were not going to work with the interactions to begin with. There's a series of complicated reasons why that is the case. And I'd like to start to break those down. So I'm just gonna hop over into our test map real quickly. So here we are in the code. This little bit here is entity component shop. So this is all of the stuff that exists on our actual shopping entity in the level. And this one function we're looking here, spawn item on first available rack, is where our issues begin. So there are two reasons why we're having this no interaction bug here. The first and broader reason is all of the items on our racks, all of the guns, all of the shirts and shoes, anything you go into a physical store and you see on the rack is the actual item there. So the gun that you see on the wall, you could theoretically actually pick up and take up off the wall and start shooting it. And this is very intentional because in the future, if we ever want to add like stealing weapons off shop shelves and stuff like that, it's really cool to have the actual weapon there. Whereas maybe in a different game, you might see that they're dummy items on the rack. They're not really, the actual item, they just look like it. That would simplify some things, but all our designers have to go in and make dummy items for all the things we actually want to sell. So we've chosen the route of using the actual items there on the shelves. Cool, right? So problem number two. These items were not built by the designers intended to be used as we're using them now on the shop shelves. So they did not have, not all of them had a physics set up, and not all of them had interaction points set up. Now the reason the weapons already worked with little to no effort is they have both of those already, but these shirts do not. So in our code here, you see this one little bit here. We're checking to see if this has an interaction component. If it doesn't, the item we're about to spawn, we add an interaction component. So what we actually need to do is do the same thing for the physics controller. So I've already got a little bit of code here that I'm just going to paste in. I'm going to uncomment this. Right, so this is doing the same thing as this, but we're checking to see if there's an initializer for the physics controller. Now, there's a set of complicated reasons why we need to do it this way, but it's important that we set the parameters to have a physics controller initializer before we even spawn the object, which is why we need to do it here, right? Okay, so this is the first bit here. We've got physics, great, no problem, right? Well, now we run into another issue, which you see in game development a lot. Because we're adding the physics before the object is actually spawned, and we're doing it through code, we run into a problem. Normally, when the designer sets up physics in DataForge, there is this physics component here, and we choose what kind of physics it would have. So rigid, dummy, static. Rigid would be like a soccer ball, static could be like a shelf, something that doesn't move. We select this as a way of sort of gating what kind of interactions you could have with this thing. If we want you to push it around, it needs to be rigid. If we don't, it needs to be static. The problem is, this is sort of locked in DataForge. These specific parameters for rigidness or staticness is something we don't directly have access to in the code. So we have a problem. If we look in our entity physics controller, there is something important going on here. Every physics controller has a physicalizer. The physics system is a very complicated system built on many different layers and several different moving parts working at the same time. But a physicalizer is just a small key part of this. And basically what it does is you have a physics controller on the game code side of things, and it uses a physicalizer to set up the physical entity in the physics side of the game code. So we don't need to go into the details of why this happens like this, but the short of it is, until now, we've always needed a physicalizer on objects. And so you'll see bits of the code where if we don't have a physicalizer here, if it's a null, then we're just going to fatal error. Just stop the game, like we could never have gotten here. Now, funny enough, Mark Abent happens to be the one who wrote this code. So it's funny that I'm doing the Bugsmashers for it. But we've decided that we're going to get rid of this. We're still using the physicalizer, but we're going to get rid of the requirement that it is not null. Because in actuality, there's only one really specific point where it definitely needs to not be null. And in the case here of the shop items, we can ignore that. So there's a couple lines of code that we're going to change here. Let's just scroll up here. Okay, so in the beginning, in the initialization of our physics controller, we check to see if we've got this physicalizer. We know here that we don't have it, so we would hit this code path where we fatal error. We don't want that. We're going to turn that off. And one other small change that we're going to do, in the event that we did have no physicalizer, we are just going to set our physicalization mode to none, just to be sure. Because as I said, the code can cope with not having the physicalizer in most cases, so long as it knows your physicalization mode is none. And then we're just going to hop over to one other file here. So now let's build these changes we made, and while we're waiting for the build to happen, let me just put this on screen. This is printing out a status of our build. And while we're waiting for that to happen, let me recap what we've just done. I know I've thrown a lot at you of physicalizers and physicalization modes, and it's all really nonsense here. But remember, the reason we're doing this is because these shop items that don't have interactions, the reason they don't have interactions is because they don't have physics. You need physics for the player to interact with things. So what we did was we ensured that if these shop items got spawned without these physics parameters that, from DataForge, because remember, they're spawned through code. Now, if they're spawned through code, they don't have these physics DataForge parameters, that's okay. They won't have a physicalizer. We'll just ignore that and keep right on trucking. And now we should be able to get interactions on these shop items. You know, while we're waiting for this build, I think I'm going to help myself to some delicious snacks here. Don't mind me. You deserve this, Mark. Abandoning Bugsmashers. Delicious. All right, so we just got back on our test map here, and let's go see if the changes we made are gonna work. Maybe we try and buy some pants, and hey, all right, we got some highlighting there we could buy, we could try on, whole 9 yards, and it's gonna work for clothing too. So we could buy, we can try on for our shirts over here. Anything. Anything except armor. Now there's a whole different reason why armor actually isn't working right now, but that's a bug for a separate day. You know what? Maybe I should go talk to Mark about this one. So today we saw how the physicalizer can give the objects in Star Citizen physics, and further how the shop needs to override this so the shop items don't have a physicalizer, that way you can properly interact with them. That was the way I slashed this bug.
Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this week's Bugsmashers. Until next time, thank you for watching. I'm out. Want to get some lunch? This took forever.
Kind of filled up on snacks earlier, but we'll see.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.